Ladies and gentlemen, please return your seatbelts and trays to their upright positions, and remember, on Blue Maxima flights, we do not have life insurance. Hello ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima, and I'm here checking out Microsoft Flight Simulator. Man, where do you even start? Where the hell do you even start with this? You know what? I'll start at the very beginning, considering the screen that just came up on the footage. I bought this on Steam. The full kit and caboodle, $100 Australian. And bloody hell it stung. Mainly because of how the game installs. I'm sure you've heard about this in the news at this point. But the way it installs is that you download a small-ass launcher, then the launcher downloads a 90GB payload. I thought this was alright, all things considered, after I learned how their in-game user-generated content marketplace works. With that said, I downloaded about 86 gigs of the game, and then on the final 4 gigs my game crashed. And when I opened it back up, it said, hey, you've got to download 40 gigs again. So I spent about 8 hours trying to get the game to download. I've even got it installed on an SSD. I'm leaving these load times in for posterity's sake, but even on an SSD, some of these load times are just kind of redonkulous. Like, the initial startup is something like 3 minutes. Well, no, it's probably not 3 minutes, but it's legitimately really long. Like, check your phone while you're waiting for it to load long. It's kind of frustrating in that sense. You'd think they wouldn't load anything. They just load in a straight flat map and then just take care of the rest whenever it needs to be loaded in, but apparently not. But yes, once you get into the game, there is a surprising lack of things to do, because the developers have said they aim this to be more a simulator style thing, instead of trying to add as many gamification elements as possible to it. And that's a hustle I can respect. I can understand why they went for that. And that's absolutely fine. However, it means that there are a few things about the game which are quite limiting. But we'll get to how that works shortly. So, you get all your general menuing in this part of the footage here. You've got a nice flight profile that shows off everything. You can look at the planes and all that. You can look at the marketplace, which I'll get to. And you've got 3 different sets of options. So you've got the general options, which have all of your settings. I've locked the game to 30 FPS, but the game's frame limiter doesn't seem to be working right now, so have fun with that. I also played on high to make sure the video didn't lag too badly when it was being processed by the same CPU that's actually playing the game. But I was also only playing on high. I usually play on ultra. And you've also got plenty of other options, including being able to turn down AI data, stream in the terrain, and save it to your hard drive so that if you go back to a place regularly, you can save re-downloading it. You can change the flight model. You can turn on the developer mode, which is not as interesting as you might think. It's only got like the ability to pause, view the game in wireframe, and have a look at what's running at the time. I assume you need to use this next to an SDK, which hasn't been released to the public yet. Side note, please tell Microsoft to release the SDK to the public. They would really love to get their hands on some of this shit. But anyway, there are tons of options, tons of assists, and tons of ways to control the game. I am currently forced to play this on a DualShock 4 because I don't have the $1,000 setup that Microsoft sent out to every, like, out-of-the-way YouTube gamer out there. Like fucking Quill 18 as an example, he got like a 1,200 euro kit, which was like both the yoke, the rudder pedals, and the throttle, and a few other people got stuff along the same lines as well, which is really annoying because it just makes you wonder how much effort they put into the controller control scheme. I will say that with a little bit of tweaking to the control scheme, you can fly this entirely on controller, but when you're on the ground or when you need to do something like talk to air traffic control, you're going to need to swap back to the keyboard, which can be kind of annoying. I also started playing this game on an Xbox 360 pad, but it was kind of uncomfortable. I'm not as big of a fan of the precision of the 360 joysticks as I am the DualShock 4 control sticks, especially in a game like this where precision is 110% necessary. So I plugged in my DualShock 4 and it didn't work by default, but I forced Steam input on, and that made the DualShock 4 work perfectly. It just pretended to be an Xbox 360 pad, and everything was gravy. So I've been using that, and I will say that, as I said, you can fly the planes. Everything that is immensely important to keeping you in the air and not upside down in a lake somewhere is on the controller. So that's fine. And they will teach you whether or not you're using keyboard and mouse or using the pad, whether or not, it will teach you one or the other, depending on which one you're using at the time you start the tutorials. Although, there are one or two keys they could do to say, like, hey, you don't need to worry about pressing this key on the keyboard, you can just press it on the controller. My favorite example, well, my favorite, quote-unquote, example of this is some planes will alert you to put the flaps up to 0 degrees once you've taken off, but you can do that yourself on the controller. You don't have to press F5 on the keyboard. I don't know why they insist you do that on the keyboard and not the controllers, but there's a lot of little things about this game which are really freaking weird, and I'll get to them as we get to them. So, just FYI, I am not very skilled in flight simulators. I've never even been on a plane, to my knowledge. I've actually been, strangely enough, in a Royal Australian Air Force jet cockpit simulator thing where there's giant screens and all the buttons are there physically and they work. I've been in one of those, but I've never been on an actual plane because, yes, that's just the way I live life sometimes. And so coming into this, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And the tutorial segments are, look, for getting you into the air and teaching you the absolute bare essentials, they work fine. Telling you all the controls, telling you what you need to do to take off and land successfully, how to navigate using the game's navlog system, which is basically just like a list of locations, directions, and estimated times for you to navigate by. It doesn't do that for you automatically. You kind of just have to keep track yourself using the stopwatch, which is weird. You'd think there'd be an assist along those lines in the game, considering what there are assists for. But yes, it'll teach you how to use the navlog, it'll teach you how to take off and land, it'll teach you what a traffic pattern is, which is basically just the game saying, hey, do a loop around and land properly instead of just going straight for the runway like a fucking retard. That would be wonderful. But there are a lot of things that it doesn't teach you and barely even touches on. So again, all the important controls are on the controller. So if you want to fly, say, a Cessna 130 something, I can't remember the exact number, but it's basically like the plane that pilots want to train on because it's so good at being a trainer plane, all the way up to the Airbus A320 Neo and the Boeing 747-8 Intercontinental, all the controls work the same way. So you can fly a Boeing 747-8 as soon as you finish the tutorials if you feel like it. But there are a few other things that they don't teach you. Like, for example, they don't give you a walk through the checklist system, which is basically their way of letting you learn how to start up your planes by flicking all the switches and pressing all the buttons. They don't walk you through air traffic control, so some of the prompts are pretty obvious, right? Like, requesting a full stop landing is fine, just getting them to ask you to follow you in the air, and asking them for directions to an airport, right? It's all pretty self-explanatory up to that point. But then when you have to do something along the lines of ask for a squawk code. What the fuck is a squawk code? The game doesn't tell you. How do I tell certain runways apart from other runways? The game doesn't tell you. I figured out myself, and I'm honestly surprised I didn't notice this faster, but you know, this is me, I'm an idiot, that when they say like runway 18, runway 25, runway 07, they're referring to the degrees in the tens number. So runway 24 is going to be, you're going to come into runway 24 at 240 degrees. That makes sense. But then when you land and you ask for taxi instructions to, say, a parking space, they'll say, traffic across Bravo, P18, Bravo, Charlie, runway 26 left, Pequod, cucumber, or something along those lines. You eventually just lose track of whatever it is the fuck he's saying, and the game doesn't help you with that either. Which, again, is weird, because they have, for some of the guides, they have in-air prompters for them. So, like, sometimes you'll get, like, a landmark that you want to go visit. Sometimes you'll get the airport that you want to go to and the runway that you want to drop down in. But sometimes you won't. And it's kind of confusing when it decides which is which and what to do. One of my favorite examples of this is the smart cam button. When you press square, or in the case of the Xbox controller, I think it'd be X, where it automatically looks at a unique object. Half the time for me it was another player in multiplayer who was nowhere fucking near me. I have no idea why. It would be way more useful to be like, hey, don't look, just have a button that says like, don't look at other multiplayer players, point me towards my destination, or something along those lines, right? For the, you know, the most casual of the casual. But for whatever reason, sometimes it just thinks a random multiplayer player way off in like a Sydney airport is more important than the Sydney Opera House, which I've literally just buzzed with like only a few meters between it and the top thing of it. So it's just, it's weird what it decides to teach you and what it doesn't decide to teach you. And as a result, you can often feel like you don't know what the hell you're doing. Like if the first time I popped into a 747-8, man, it feels so different. All the buttons are the same, and I was able to get myself off the ground and in the air, but it felt like the combination of like the trim, the flaps, the speed I had to maintain because it's a jet over like a single propeller plane, and just a bunch of other minor things that I felt like I really needed to know in order to just properly know how to manage this plane. I didn't get any information on. Even just short tutorials that would teach you the exact differences between each kind of plane and what to look out for would have been great. A short tutorial on what the ATC stuff means and how I can figure that stuff out for myself, that would be great. A short tutorial on just, there's so many things. There's so many like tiny things that they could really do to teach you, but they just don't. For some reason, there's a lot of things they could do to have assists for them that don't, and there's some that do, and then there's some that just feel entirely useless. Like there's an objectives menu, for example, and it's stuck at continue climb to designated cruise altitude all the freaking time whenever I was on a free flight. When you're in a tutorial flight, for example, it'll be fine. But when you're in just a free flight anywhere in the world, it'll always stick on continue climb to designated cruise altitude, and it'll just stay there. Why? I don't know. Also, you might notice in this footage that it's pointing me at something that's 3,100 nautical miles away from me. That's really, really fucking far. I don't know why that's there, but it was there for a while and then it was just gone. I didn't even notice an update that changed the behavior of it. So, yeah, the user interface has got a few weird things about it, but there are some positives. Like, the fact that you can pop out all these windows and put them in, like, other monitors, which is something I wholeheartedly recommend you do if you've got multiple monitors to support it. But at the same time, I'm leaving them, as many as I can anyway, in the game so that you can see them. That's great. I absolutely love the flight UI that they've got going on just when you're in third person, because it tells you everything you need to know. It tells you how hard you're pulling back on the yoke. It tells you how much fuel, your engine power, the direction that you're going, and all that. It's also really impressive when you're inside the plane. Don't get me wrong, but there is a lot there, and any plane that's more complicated than, again, that Cessna that they let you fly around in during the tutorial is probably going to confuse you, which is not great. I would really like to see some more tutorials going over this. They do, as I said before, they do have a checklist thing which allows you to see how to flip all the switches on and off, but it seems like if you want to know like how all these buttons in this plane work, and they're all like clickable, you can move the mouse to click on them, although there doesn't seem to be a way to interact with any of these like little buttons going on, at least without, at least on the controller. With mouse and keyboard it's fine, obviously, but it just seems weird to leave so much out in the open after the first 8 tutorials were mostly great. The only problem I had with the tutorials was that they were a bit on rails, even for a game like this. For example, the first tutorial, despite the fact that all they're trying to do is teach you how the first set of controls work, which is like how the rudder works, how to slowly like tilt your plane to the left and right so that you just don't roll and crash into the ground, how to increase and decrease like your engine power, and how to use your trim to make sure that you can maintain a steady altitude. All of that stuff that's covered in the first lesson, but yet you're restricted to such a tiny little area that they won't let you out of for some reason. And there's a couple of other ones like that too, like the one that teaches you how to use the navlog by yourself so that you don't get any assistance. I still managed to find my way like to the points and navigate my way home, but it didn't count as a complete because I didn't hit some invisible checkpoint that I couldn't see. But again, once I managed to like find my way home using the navlog, I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm done with the tutorials. I don't need to replay that one. I know how it works. So with that said, let's talk about the main part of the game, which is the free flight. You pick anywhere in the world. That includes one of several thousand airports, and it's legitimately impressive. Like, you zoom out from the globe in the menu option, and you think, oh, those are just like lights to like show the globe all lit up. No, all those white points are airports you can take off from if you so desire. And it's legitimately quite impressive. But you can also take off from anywhere. So you can click and hold one spot on the map, and it'll pop up with set as departure or set as arrival. If you set it as departure, you'll start up in the air and you'll already be flying. So if you have the good luck to pick any particular area that you might want to go to, well, you can just start from there and just go. Which is, again, it's a really nice touch, but it's not helped out by something which I'll get to later. Then once you hit the flight button, once your flight is planned out, also one other thing annoying about planning a flight is that if you want to add like landmarks on the way, for example, right? So say that I take off in Washington, D.C. I want to land in another airport in Washington, D.C.'s general area, but I want to see the Pentagon on the way. I can't select the airport I start from, the Pentagon, and then the airport I want to land at. I have to pick the airport that I start at, the airport that I want to finish at, and then I have to pick the Pentagon, which is bizarre, a little bit weird. Also, I will point out that again with the controller, you can't actually use much of it in the menus. You can use it to get through like the main menu and the options menu, but once you get to the globe, the marketplace, or a couple of other minor places in the game, no controller whatsoever. It doesn't even prompt you to press buttons. You just have to swap back to the mouse and keyboard, at least for the time being. But yes, once you actually take off, once you're off the ground, once you're exploring a big area, once you have picked out the first place that you want to go and you go, holy fuck, it's gorgeous. There is absolutely no denying that this is a technical achievement beyond anything that I've ever seen. And I know that this sounds like the rest of like the press as they go on about this, but holy shit, they aren't kidding. It is so impressive to be able to take off from some random airstrip right next to my town, follow the roads, see this big ass lake that I have known purely by driving up and down the road in relation to it, see the bloody swimming pool I used to swim at, follow the highway and like a couple of little bridges over some tiny rivers, and see my house. Now, my house is actually relatively new in the grand scheme of things, so I wouldn't have been surprised if it wasn't there, but no, it was there. It was even like modeled in the correct color, which is beyond belief. There are some things that are wrong, of course. One thing that I noticed immediately, because the first flight I did was to my house, because that's what they recommend you do. You just try and find your own house. But one of the things I noticed immediately was that a couple of solar panels were on some houses, and that was great. But it was only like 3 houses out of the 20 in this street, and I know that there's more than 3 houses in this street that have solar panels. So their AI isn't particularly perfect, And you get to see some examples of that in London, which is just where I picked to film this footage when I was at the 5-hour mark. I've flown about 8 hours at this point, by the way. But yeah, you see things like bridges that have sunken into the water. There are some buildings that are missing. I can't blame them for that, but we'll get to how that can be resolved shortly. There's just some weird crap going on sometimes with the satellite imagery. One of the big examples is that due to a single typo in a building in Melbourne, apparently there is now a 232-story tall spire just sticking in the air. That's kind of great, and it's all helped by the idea that by using Bing Maps, their satellite data from Microsoft, it streams in more accurate data as you play, and there's apparently something like 2 petabytes of data online for this, which is ridiculous. That's 2,000 terabytes. That's more hard drives than my computer could ever hold. And while I will admit that when you get up close and personal, some of it is a bit off, when you're flying over Uluru and you see Ayers Rock modeled really, really well, when you're flying over Tokyo and you're seeing thousands upon thousands of 3D rendered buildings stretching into the distance, when you're flying through the Grand Canyon, when you're flying, pick any landmark, pick any goddamn landmark that you like and go to it, and there's a decent chance it'll be there. And it'll look great. Like, for example, I flew over Sydney, and I went straight to the Sydney Opera House, although I was a little bit disappointed by the fact that they didn't get the Sydney Harbour Bridge right. Although that'd probably be like another model that they need to worry about. But sometimes they'll get things right, like branding on the sides of buildings. Although, as I said, kind of inconsistent. As a result, it also requires you to have like a rolling cache thing on you. Well, it doesn't require... Excuse me. It doesn't require a rolling cache on your hard drive, but they sure recommend it, especially if you plan on coming back. But yes, the game is gorgeous. It is extremely well done, and again, a technical marvel unlike which I've never seen. And I just need to point this out again. Anywhere on the planet. I went to Antarctica. It looked like shit, but I went to Antarctica and I took off from McMurdo. That's insane. Then I just look back at the fact that there's a local RC group near my house, and for some reason it was mistaken for a actual airstrip, while another airstrip that's nearby, there's an actual airstrip, didn't actually get recognized by the game. But yes, literally anywhere you want to go. You want to go try find Machu Picchu, you can go try find Machu Picchu. If you just want to try and find your house, you can do that. I flew over the English Channel. There's nothing there, but I did it anyway. However, one of the things that annoys me about the way this game works right now is that it's very hard to actually find something that I don't have marked out on the map. So when you're on the map, you can see a few different kinds of things. You can obviously see all the airports that they've got going. You can also see the airports that they've put all of their attention into. Like there's 20 in the game that they have specifically hand-modeled, and then there's like 10 in the deluxe versions. The rest of them are proc-gen airports. The AI has just been like, okay, I see what this airport looks like. I'm going to try and make it look like an actual airport. So you can get all of them. There are also some landmarks, like the Tokyo Skytree, the Taj Mahal, the Pentagon, the Lincoln Memorial, a bunch of things along those lines, right? That are landmarks that you can mark out for your trips. But it's very limited as to what you can select. There are a fair few landmarks that I thought to myself, I would like to go and see, but they aren't particularly, like, mapped out. So you end up, ironically, having to go to Google Maps and looking up where they are in relation to a nearby airport, and then plotting your own route yourself and hoping you don't get it wrong. This worked fine for me a couple of times. Like, for example, I wanted to see Mount Fuji. So I took off from an airport near Mount Fuji, I headed towards Mount Fuji, And then it said something along the lines of, Mount Fuji is southwest of Tokyo. So I turned northeast and I headed straight to Tokyo to do some general navigation. But what of places that aren't particularly that easy to find? My major example, and the one that I ran into right before I recorded this footage, was Machu Picchu. I thought to myself, alright, I want to go see Machu Picchu. I want to see what it looks like from the air. And I tried. I really did. I found the closest airport I could get on Google Maps. I went straight southeast, right, as soon as I took off. And I couldn't find it. I couldn't find it to save my goddamn life. And I get the feeling that this is going to happen with a few other of the landmarks that I want to go to in this game as well. Because there's just a bunch of them that are missing from the map. And one of the things I thought to myself immediately that I wanted to do was, I want to add a way to calculate latitude and longitude in the world map, or I want the ability to add custom points to the map and have other people see them. Because imagine that, right? You could have, you can mark something as a really lovely looking waterfall. Or you can mark a landmark that isn't there yet, like Machu Picchu, for example. Excuse me. Or you could just mark, your hometown or something, right? Because this game's got some fantastic multiplayer, and I'll get into how that works shortly. But it would be really nice to allow people to share that sort of thing. Now, you can share flight plans. So you can make a flight plan on the globe, and then save that and send it to someone else as a regular old-fashioned Windows file. That's entirely possible. But man, would it be nice to do it online. Even if you could just say, just this really nice area with some great mountains and is absolutely great to fly through. Something along those lines, just that you could just, pull from the internet, along the lines of, say, Noctis 4, or Elite Dangerous, how they let you find and name planets, or No Man's Sky, or something along those lines, right? Because they're really trying to emphasize community with this one, how important the community is to the game's development, or is going to be to the game's development over the next few years. So why not let us, share landmarks, let us add more landmarks to the pile, and, let the community decide whether or not those landmarks are worth visiting or not. That would be fantastic. As for the multiplayer function, it's wonderful. So, I was playing this game on, I'm playing this on Steam, and I have Steam friends who are playing this game at the same time as me, and if I find them on the world map, I can just deploy right on top of them. It'll take a few minutes to load, but once it's downloaded all the terrain and popped me into the game, I can just go and I can just fly next to them. I did this with one of my Steam friends who I haven't talked to in yonks. I popped into his game and we both flew around his hometown, which was in Arizona, I believe. I'd be lying if I said I knew. Again, I'm not American. I don't know these things. But I literally just dropped into his game to see what the hell he was doing. And it's bloody nuts that you can do that. There's multiple selectable servers, and there's a limit to how many people you can see at the same time. It's 50. But still, whenever I popped into a world and saw a bunch of other planes flying around me, it was extremely impressive. Especially when the air traffic control, which is generated via, the voices I should say, is generated via Microsoft speech generation AI. It didn't sound unrealistic in the slightest. A little bit robotic in the way that it would talk. It was very clearly not human. But it didn't sound horrible at all. I could believe it if my brain was just particularly shut off and I was focusing on the flight. But what made this even cooler was that the air traffic control would say to me, Cessna Skyhawk 69420 Heavy. Yes, you can actually change your flight number on the back, and the speech accounts for that. It's great. 69420. Do you see a 7478 off to your 240 flight height 12,000? Something along those lines. And then I'd look and then I'd be like, Holy shit, there he is. I can see him. But even better, this game has a full-on hookup with the flight plans and the weather of the entire world in real time. One of the achievements, and one of the first achievements I got, because I just had to see if this actually worked for myself, was find a plane on the world map, click on it, make a flight plan out of its flight plan, and then fly that path. I did. That's insane. That's legitimately insane. It's so cool to be able to do as well, because you can just tail it if you like. If you see a plane that's just taken off, you can just click it and go straight to it and just tail it. Fly alongside it like an escort. And the fact that the weather is also done in real time as well, to the point where if there's a storm going on, you can fly straight into that storm. If you want to change the weather, you can do that as well. So do you want to change it so that, it's like storming like hell over New York City? You can do that. But if you get up and you realize, oh shit, I can't actually sightsee like this, you can automatically change the weather back to like clear skies so that you can buzz the Statue of Liberty without having to worry about running into it. It's extremely customizable, which I really appreciate, because it means that you get the experience that you want. And you get the experience that you desire to have if you just want to fly a plane. That's where the quote-unquote gameplay ends, though. You get 20 planes in the base package, 25 and 30 in the higher tier packages. And they all fly not the same. They are obviously different in the way that you have to handle them, although there are a lot of like propeller planes that feel relatively similar to each other. And again, you can go anywhere in the world, but you mostly don't have goals. Now, this is something that I don't really agree with, and let me just explain to you why. So, you've got the world map that you can pick anywhere that you can go, and you can go anywhere. And sure, that's great for people who just want to sim. But then, off to the side, you've got a series of standalone activities, one of which that you're watching right now. And you're going to see that flight that I put in the intro, which is ridiculous. But the thing about it is that you've got two different sets of activities. You've got landing challenges. There are 24 in the base game, and then they cycle in new live ones every now and again, where you have to land as precisely as possible. As little ground roll as possible, as smooth a landing as possible, and right in the center if you can. You need to touch down in the blue square and then come to a stop. And you get graded with points every time you do this. And it really annoys me how someone like Air Force Proud 95 can get a 950, 950 straight out of nowhere, but I can barely scrape 600,000 if I'm lucky. But, as I was saying, you get all these different kinds of landings to give you a little bit of stuff to do, and then, these take like 10 minutes, right? At most. You're seriously not going to spend too long in the air at all. Most of the time it's actually loading screens. But then, you have bush trips, which are ridiculous. They take place over multiple legs. You don't get access to GPS. You have to rely entirely on your... you have to rely entirely on the navlog, so that's navigating by directions and time alone. And you have to try and get to the end of multiple legs. These legs can last anywhere between 20 minutes to 2 hours, and the shortest bush flight that I've seen is 7 hours long. So, I'm kind of surprised, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, that I would go to the effort to put this in. There are 3 bush trips right now. One is 7 hours, one is 8 hours, and one is 10 fucking hours long. And if you manage to get through the entire thing without using the point me the right way cheat button, you get an achievement for it. So, in my personal opinion, this accounts for the medium and the hard core segments of like what you can do in Flight Simulator, right? And you might think to yourself, well, isn't just picking an area and going in like the world map something along those lines? Well, not so much. I feel like they could have done more. Now, they have said that they didn't want to do a full-on career mode along the lines of, say, Euro Truck Simulator 2, because they felt like that it would like take the just take the whole sim thing and like make a mockery of it. But I think that if they weren't at least willing to do something a little in order to, like, ease in players a lot more, I feel like it's kind of taking the piss. Because as I mentioned before in my segment on the tutorials, I feel like that you could really extend this in a meaningful way, while also giving players a bit more to do than just, like, picking a position on the globe and going for it. So, here's my thinking. You've got the 8 tutorials, which teach you everything that you need to know, from your controls, to how trims and flaps work, to how to land properly, to how to navigate properly. Those are fine. But then you follow it up with a second set of not really missions that give you a trip around the world of Microsoft Flight Simulator. So say, your first one is like a 20-minute flight across Washington that lets you buzz by the, a 20-minute flight across Washington that lets you buzz by the Pentagon and the Lincoln Memorial or whatever, and then you land. And then you've got your second mission, which takes you, like, takes you over the top of, like, Tokyo, for example, but in a different plane that you could use to learn this new plane and practice, and maybe you have to, like, land in a specific way once you get to the other end. Then, on the third mission, it takes you to another landmark, it gives you another objective, like, say, make this flight without falling below a certain airspeed, or something like that, you know? Just, at the same time that you're giving us, like, a tour around the world of Flight Simulator, put in more important things, so that by, say, mission 25, you need to fly to Mount Everest, you need to do all the air traffic control stuff, you need to properly start up like a Boeing 747-8 or something along those lines, and then you need to land there while under really difficult conditions. And you could just be slowly ramping this up over the course of an entire, like, world tour trip, while at the same time letting people who don't care for that stuff just turn on all the assists and just go and fly these places as they've been picked out. I feel like doing something like that wouldn't be breaking the whole sim aspect, teaching people the important stuff, and letting them see just how fucking cool being able to go anywhere on the planet is. I really do feel like that would be important. I'm not saying what's there is bad, although I do think the 7-hour fucking bush flight is a little intense. I just think you could do to give players a little more than the tutorial, and giving players the ability to tour the world while at the same time building up their skills would be an absolutely fantastic thing to do. And frankly, I would do it myself if I had access to the SDK, or at least I'd give it a try, but it seems like they're not handing that out publicly. Who knows, maybe I should sign up for that partner program they got going on. There are all sorts of other minor things that I should talk about, though. You do have 20 planes, and as I said, they all feel pretty different from each other, although they all control the same way, so sometimes they can feel a little bit similar. Although I will promise you, excuse me again, you absolutely can notice the difference between the 747-8 and the Cessna 132 or the 152 or whatever the model number of it is. They are planning on including things like helicopters. I believe that's going to be like the first major update. It'd be great to see jets as well, like full-on fighter jets, even if they're like their Microsoft Flight Simulator X versions that don't actually have any weaponry, they're just kind of there. But this is all going to be handled, well, probably going to be handled, we just have to see, by the game's marketplace. Now, the game's marketplace is actually really interesting, and it's the reason why they had to download the game as they have, because every single plane, mission, special airport, and other such related separate fluff from all the map data is included as a separate object, and then when you're in the marketplace, you can buy custom content. So the ones that are available on the marketplace as of now are a new plane, a few done-up airports, and the deluxe edition stuff, if you didn't buy that when you first bought the game. You have to buy these things called flight simulator credits, and then then you just have to, it'll just buy it immediately. At least that's what they do in Australia. The rules might be different depending on where you live. But this just means that people will be able to buy whatever they want straight from the front, instead of having to worry about like 7 different mod loaders, which is extremely good. I actually really approve of this approach, because it means that people can just add new content in as they feel the need or want to. Because admittedly, the fact that you can see a huge downloadable content list on like a train simulator page is kind of insane, and it kind of gives people the wrong idea. But with Microsoft Flight Simulator, you can't say the same thing, because you get 20 planes, 20 special airports, and the entirety of the goddamn world to explore. It is, of course, let down, again, as I said, by things like certain buildings not being there, certain areas being a little bit wacky, and, you know, all that sort of general stuff. But there's actually already steps towards fixing that, at least for some people, because one of the first things that came out was actually a building pack for London, which actually puts a lot of the really special buildings back in. So, while you do have the option to just fly around and explore the world if you are just a casual flight player, if you're just a casual pilot, for those people who are so into this that they've bought like 1,200 euros worth of flight equipment before they've even started up the game, the fact that they can just one-click and buy stuff from third-party publishers that just immediately integrates into their game is really well done, and I just hope they find a way to open up the mod tools so that we can do that without having to go through the Microsoft Marketplace. And some of the updates, some of the achievements are ridiculous. So you've got 1,000 hours of flight time. Yep. You've also got a bunch of things like land on a 12-degree or higher slope runway, touch and go, just do a regular touch and go, do an intercontinental flight, start up an Airbus A320 Neo without referring to the checklist, which I got automatically for some reason, despite the fact I hadn't flown the Airbus A320 Neo at that time. It was freaking weird. And there are other things I haven't gone over, like there's groups, so you can just hop into a group of your friends if you don't want to be annoyed by that. You can also set it to that so only people following like real-time weather and time are the ones that you'll see. Otherwise, you can just see everyone flying around. And they have promised that they are going to continuously update the game over time. So that apparently it's going to be like a 10-year plan, which is ridiculous. But alright, we'll let them do it. We'll see if this game gets any better. Hopefully it will, of course. But yes, there are also some little things you can do in the like top thing going on. Now, I will point out that the game performs terribly, but it's got a pretty damn good reason. Again, look at it. Look at how all the hills are rendered. Look at how many 3D rendered buildings there are. Look at the detail inside of the cockpits. Fly inside a bloody storm and watch the raindrops individually fly back against the windshield. Fly into an actual storm that's happening in the real world and watch as it fiddles with you, and that's really bad phrasing. Watch as it throws your aircraft around like it's a bloody piece of paper. And you can realize that, yeah, there's a reason why it doesn't run very well at all. Because I've just kind of accepted the fact that I'm not getting this to over 60 frames a second on Ultra. I can do it. I've got an overclocked 8700K and a RTX 2080. And I can get to 30, but whenever I get into like big cities, or when I even get even remotely near big cities, it'll often drop to like 15 FPS, maybe 10 if I'm lucky. The controls remain perfectly responsive as you do, although in some cases they're not particularly great to begin with. Like, I really wish they'd up or down or just fiddle with the sensitivity of like changing your flaps, not your flaps, your trim, because sometimes when it feels like you're changing your trim or your throttle, it can lag a bit behind where you really want it to be. And this is a game about making sure that you've got your engine power, your trim, and your general speed just in general in the right spot to make sure you can like maintain your altitude, it can be a bit weird. I've also had it crash on me a couple of times, but the main times that it crashed on me was when I tried to skip travel. It's a feature that they include in like the top bar, where you can pick a destination. You can click it, it'll show you all the different parts of the flight, and then you can click it and you'll go straight to that part, but it doesn't show you like the individual landmarks. It just shows you, it was like taxi, takeoff, ascent, just general idling in the air as you're going, descent, and then taxi into the airport you just landed at, which is weird. I don't know why they insist on doing it that way and not letting me, like, say, immediately jump to my next landmark. But that's just how it is. Again, there are just some weird things they really need to tweak about this game, at least in my personal opinion. But yes, when I tried that, it crashed on me. I tried it again in this video footage, but it spent so long downloading that I think some things timed out, and then the game didn't know what to do with itself, and it just stayed as loading forever, which was really freaking bizarre. I had to Alt F4 the game when I realized that it wasn't actually doing anything. I've heard some other people have had some pretty bad crashes and all that, but that's not me personally. I'm just saying that I've been, outside of that one install crash and the two crashes I had trying to skip the travel, everything's gone okay so far. And I am basically in no position to comment on the quality of the simulation, but considering that I understand flying planes is very hard, and I find flying these planes quite difficult, at least not without crashing. Like, once I'm in the air, I'm fine, but that's what everybody says. But yeah, once I'm in the air, I'm fine, but I still have trouble landing from time to time, and good luck trying to get me to do anything in a storm or with no visibility or what have you. But yeah, I've basically gone over everything there is to go over. So, overall opinions on Microsoft Flight Simulator. It's a technical marvel. It is legitimately amazing being able to pick anywhere on the globe and just drop straight in and start flying in any particular direction that I like. Being able to fly over massive cities and have the buildings all populate below me and just look like the actual city as it's seen, to the point where they even get the colors on the generated buildings right, is incredibly impressive. Being able to fly from one side of the country to the other and have all of these things just spill out is fantastic. Flying the planes is fun. It's really satisfying to be able to do a good takeoff, go and see a landmark, and then land at another airport. And all the systems are there, like some really impressive text-to-speech for the air traffic controllers. The fact that you can drop in on your friends anywhere, make groups and do whatever the hell you like. Like, I imagine the hardcore simmers are going to start having some real fun with this once some really intense planes come out on the marketplace. The overall just quality of the presentation is spectacular, although it's kind of given a bit of a kick in the balls by the fact that no computer that exists today can run this relatively well yet. But that's to be expected considering the amount of technology they're trying to shove into this thing. And outside of that one install crash, it's been relatively stable for me. I can fly pretty well on a mouse and keyboard, and there are plenty of different options and assists available to make sure it's as comfortable for you as possible. And I will probably try and find my general balance as I go, and everyone will have a different balance, and that's great. Being able to do little things like change your tail number and all that is also pretty damn fun. And it's, as a flight simulator, it's really well done. Hence why they call it Microsoft Flight Simulator. But I do have complaints about it. Oh yeah, I also forgot the marketplace is an absolutely fantastic way for pushing third-party content. I just hope that they release that stuff publicly in order to like, you know, encourage standalone modding and not just absolutely rely on Microsoft forever for all this, because this game will probably die eventually, as they all do. But with that said, my negatives are the tutorials don't go far enough and are a bit too restrictive. I wish there was some more activities, even if it was just a simple set of increasingly difficult challenges alongside taking you to see some of the more beautiful places in Flight Simulator, because there's a lot of places that they show off in like the trailers and stuff for this game that you'll never find on your own. It's kind of annoying like that. I wish they just give you the ability to do that, up to maybe even including the point of letting people share their own landmarks in the game itself somehow, instead of having to make us look up like Google Maps, point out an airport, try and figure out the direction, and see if we can fuzz out the distance. And yeah, the technical performance isn't great. The loading times could really do with a kick in the ass. Even just something as simple as like having some more details about what's being loaded at the time, like downloading terrain data, loading terrain data, generating trees, generating meshes, you know, stuff like that to just convince you that the game's still loading as it goes, because these loading times can be really, really goddamn long. And some of the things like the assists don't make any sense sometimes. Things like the smart cam don't make any sense sometimes. And the, and just like the general overall preparedness will only take you to the point of flying a Cessna, but it won't teach you how to properly fly jets. It won't tell you about half the mechanics like the checklists and the air traffic control and how you're supposed to deal with that. And I hope that they extend like the tutorials in some way to make more sense along those lines. But there is an SDK out there. Hopefully we'll be able to figure this all out. Because outside of like its like areas that lack polish, it is legitimately an amazing simulator. It's not an amazing game, because that's not what it is. And to be fair, they called it Microsoft Flight Simulator, so it's not entirely out of the ordinary. I'm just saying, it's really well done for what it is. And if the idea of taking off in a plane and exploring every single square inch of the world appeals to you, I would wholeheartedly recommend picking this one up. But it's absolutely one of those games where you kind of have to make your own fun. And while I can see myself picking this up every couple of weeks and just flying to a random landmark while watching a podcast in the background or something for the 8 or so hours that I've been playing it over the past few days since it came out, I admit that it's starting to grow a little bit old on me. And having a little bit extra, way to point me in the direction of areas I want to go or things I might want to do in order to just challenge myself or see particular areas that I actually haven't seen in the game before, those would be great. And funnily enough, despite the fact that they said that they don't want to go too far away from like pure simulation, it's funny because when you're in the dev mode, you can find like scripts for things like Red Bull races. So I don't know if that's something that they've planned to include later on, or if that's just a leftover from like Flight Simulator X. But one way or another, that'll be interesting to see. And while this game's going to get improvements over 10 years, and you've got multiple different companies working to provide higher quality airports, you've got higher quality planes that might have a better understanding of the physics model than the actual Flight Simulator planes do. And again, they have promised to support this for 10 years, and considering the absolutely bonkers, like, critical reception that this game has gotten in the press, it's not looking like they're going to dump it anytime soon. But yeah, when you're flying in a bloody small-ass plane over Central Park, there's a storm off in the distance that looks gorgeous, The waves are like really well modeled. There's tons of trees everywhere to really give the feeling of that. And then you just pan back up to look at all these 3D modeled buildings that have been generated from the satellite data, and it just looks an absolute fucking ton. Like New York, just by itself, even without any like little add-ons that you can dip into. It's fantastic. So who do I recommend this to? Casual explorers who just want to fly across the world in a plane and not really worry about it. Hardcore simmers who already know what they're doing and can turn off all of the assists are probably going to have a great time with this too, especially when they start including all of like the third-party marketplace stuff. So they have like tons of extra really detailed airports to land at and what have you. But for someone who is beyond the casual, but not at the level of like, you know, a master simmer yet, who wants to learn things like ATC and like really proper ways to land and all that, just like stuff that'd be more geared towards the experts than just the noobs. It can be a little bit disappointing because there's no real clear path between the beginner stuff with the Cessna and then the expert stuff, where you're flicking on all the switches, doing all the proper ATC, and taxiing and taking off properly, and then doing the same thing again when you land. That little in-between just seems to be missing, and that's the one thing I really want them to work on. But still, it's a technical marvel. It's great for just first-time flyers who just want to pick a place in the world and go. And if you're not willing to pay the $100 like I did, because I like supporting these kinds of efforts, there is you can get it on Xbox Game Pass on PC. I absolutely hate Xbox Game Pass because it's really fucking annoying to install games sometimes. But if you're one of the lucky souls who manages to get it working, you can try it for $1. And at that price, why the fuck not? This has been Blue Maxima, and I will see you all next time.